Is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
The Public Theater has a hit with Idiot Savant. It's directed by the eminent theater artist Richard Foreman, and featured prominently in its cast is the actor Willem Dafoe, who started downtown in the avant-garde theater world but went on to do many notable movie roles, most recently that really disturbing Antichrist. Welcome to Theater Talk.
And you went all the way to Hollywood to come back to do the avant-garde. You don't get away from your roots?
I never went to Hollywood. I've been someone that worked in New York, worked at a theater every day, and then occasionally I'd go off to do movies. And those movies kind of stacked up, and they have a different profile than theater does. But the truth is, day to day, I was 90% a theater actor.
Yeah.
And less so now because I parted with the company that I worked with for over 25
the
years.
Group, yeah.
But this is kind of a pleasant return.
Now, Richard, can you explain to our viewers what they will see if they go to Idiot Savant?
You know, this is problematic for me always because we've often got good reviews, and it's a plus and a minus because, you know, my parents never understood my plays, and they'd come to every play and say, "Oh, son, we didn't understand it, but it was great to see you doing it." So I don't want to be nasty to people. I don't want people to come who aren't going to like it. And there's a percentage of people who are more interested in normal theater that manipulates them in normal ways that will not have fun at my play, as opposed to many people who've been coming to my plays for 40 years. What you will see is my own continuing effort to figure out how a human being is supposed to use this mechanism. A spiritual quest, in a way. May not be obvious on first viewing, but that's really what I'm involved with. And it's a little rigorous and it's a little demanding, but repays those people who want that.
And you have fans. Is he manipulating people in abnormal ways?
I don't know. Having given what he said, I'm one of his fans. I was one of his fans before I worked with him. I like sitting in the theater watching a Richard Foreman show. I like how I think. I like how I feel. And but that, I suppose, did take some training, and I do recognize that why I liked it years ago is probably different than why I like it now. And I think there was a maturing of how I related to his plays.
Now, do you require your actors to understand what you're doing?
You know, I have a reputation as being a very sort of intellectual director and so forth, but I assure you, when we work, we never talk in those terms. As a matter of fact, our rehearsals are usually just full of jokes, and we're just trying out doing things in different ways with no theoretical discussion. So I have no idea.
So I'm curious to know, though, it's something you touched on earlier. When you get the kind of reviews, these very good reviews you've gotten, particularly from someone like Ben Brantley, who's been a real champion of your work for a long time, does it, though, become a problem for the audience that has read that review? They have it now in their mind what only Ben Brantley's interpretation is of the play. So they're no longer coming to it completely open to it.
Yes, but that's true for many, many different works of art. Ben Brantley's interpretation is usually not that far off the mark, so it's a fine way to be prepared. But of course, they're coming influenced.
So there is a mark as you see it. I mean, your play's very nonlinear, but you say, this is what it's supposed to be. In other words, there is an absolute truth in a Richard Foreman play.
Oh, absolutely, there is an absolute truth in it. Yes.
Now, I understand from a friend of mine who watched rehearsals, and you can tell us this when you're working with him, that aside from all the laughing and joking going on, incredible precision and drilling, because the thing has to move like a clock, really.
I don't know about move like a clock, but Richard is very precise in what he wants to see.
With the sound effects going, and I just noticed that you turned this way just to get that sound hits at the same time, you move your head this way. Is it that precisely done?
Yes, but it's a different kind of precision than you'd think. It's a precision that's totally tied to Richard's pleasure. I can't even detect what the effect is sometimes. He's really sitting out in the audience and saying, well, could you not go so slow when you do that? So you do it another way. And you're always led by, you don't know what the effect is. So I approach it like an athlete or like a dancer, because you can't approach it in traditional psychological terms.
So it's a rhythmical kind of thing.
Rhythm, it's task-oriented, and you're trying to cultivate a relationship to the material that you may not always understand, but you have to have like anything, you start to, with the abstraction, personalize your dialogue with it.
And that's, of course, what I want my actors to do. I want them to have a secret life that I don't know anything about. Just like they don't ask me a lot of what my secret input in the play is. You know, it's like making a big composition. We don't have a story, really, though I can tell you there's a definite arc to the play, and it might be interesting to people to know that we rehearsed from the beginning with the set, with the lights, with all the music possibilities, and it's sort of like editing a film where we just tried different combinations of all those elements.
And you've created everything, the set, the lights, the music possibilities, and the voiceover.
Yeah.
So you are creating a live film.
I always wanted to make theater from the time I've started making theater the way Picasso would paint a picture.
Yes.
You know, he does it, and that's it.
Yes.
But you still have, as the actor, freedom within this framework he's created to explore the character as you see it?
Sure, and also even to invent things in the physical action, because sometimes, while he's very precise in what he wants, there's huge sections. We don't traditionally block it out. You know, there is getting from A to B. He'll give you A, he may hint at B, but you participate in how to get from one place to another.
Sure, any director will. I'm no different than any more classically oriented director who says the most exciting moments are when the actor, such as Willem, brings you all kinds of things that you couldn't possibly anticipate. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Hey, well, you bring that fabulous voice. I mean, just the rumbling and the growling of the voice I find so effective in the performance.
But who invented the hairstyle?
Yes, whose idea was that?
That's the first. That's in the first sentence of the screenplay.
It's not a screenplay.
I did an interview the other day, and I said he was a great film director. See,
spoken like a true man of the theater there, Willem.
Hey, Richard. Okay, Richard. On your website, you have a very interesting description of how you first generate a play. That you get up in the morning. Tell us about it. How you put together a play in the first place.
Well, this play is a little different because this play is a play I wrote 12 years ago and always thought there was something there but wasn't satisfied. And when Willem and I decided to do another play, I rewrote this considerably. But normally, I write a little bit every day, and I end up with a huge stack of pages. And then when time comes to do a play, I'm neurotic, so maybe 2 years before I have to do a play, I think, well, let me find an interesting page. And I find a page, and, oh, that's pretty good. And then I look through this huge stack. What page could go with that? I find another page that seems to relate somehow, written at a totally different time. And in the end, I collage a script of 40 pages or whatever it is, and that collage then goes into rehearsal, is reworked in rehearsal, but that's how the script is generated.
I just wanted to ask you, with just a minute left to go, can you give us a sense of what that avant-garde world, if for lack of a better term, was when you guys were starting out? Because it's a lost world now. New York has changed so much. The landscape has changed. What was it like when you guys were young and beginning in New York at that time?
The culture has changed, and much to my regret, when you get to be my age, you usually regret the changes. But the most important thing was that, especially there was Soho, and we were all in Soho, and all the arts and all the artists were looking at the work of other artists in other disciplines. And there really was that sense of community that you weren't so much making theater, making music, making dance, you were making art coming out of the same spiritual necessity. That does not exist now.
You agree?
I do. I mean, in my experience, for example, when I first started working with the Wooster Group in like 1977, and even before that, I was in New York a little bit, people in the theater weren't trained in the theater. They were painters, they were dancers, they were poets, they were car mechanics. There was just a time where people said, yes, we can rent a storefront and try to make these things. And there wasn't, for a lot of these people I was involved with, it wasn't a career. They were young, they were turned on by other artists. As Richard says, they were seeing lots of different things. It was very interdisciplinary, and it wasn't that self-conscious, and nobody was covering it necessarily. There was no scrutiny. Now, some of those same places are filled with people that have taken degrees in experimental theater. They think it's a career, and good on them, because they've seen people able to live off this in some cases. But it's much different.
That storefront that you rented to do those plays is now given over to a banana republic. I mean,
it's true.
That community of artists cannot exist in a city that is the price of Beverly Hills, can it?
It's a tragedy. No.
But I think there's people in Brooklyn who are going to argue with you.
True.
Yes, that is true. And our theater, normally, not when I'm at the public, but we had our theater in St. Mark's Church for many years, and we had whole teams of 15, 16 interns working on our shows, and a lot of them worked in our theater then, but their orientation is in Brooklyn.
But also those people, a lot of the people that, that was before the internet. That was before a lot of electronic stuff was happening.
You couldn't stay home.
So different people are making work different way. What's different is that kind of old-fashioned, you get a space, you have a community, you serve that community, and you make your little things, and then it either spreads or it dies.
Listen, it's a societal thing. We're living in a society where that kind of activity is much more difficult. I think much to the loss in this society, what's happening.
Is it better to be the undiscovered artist doing your own thing than it is to be suddenly discovered by the New York Times and the expectations start flying and the crowds start coming?
If you can sustain yourself realistically, economically, yes, it is better. But how many people can do that?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would.
Acting?
Oh, acting's different.
Would you give it up?
Would you give up those movie deals?
Well, maybe not.
Hey,
Okay, with that.
I'm not about money. I've never been about money. But money's nice when you can get it.
Artists.
The secret
Should not
history
starve.
of art in the West to be written is about how many of the famous artists that you know about in all disciplines actually came from families with money, and so they were able to do exactly what they wanted to do.
Did you guys come from well-heeled
I came not
backgrounds?
from wealthy, but my father told me, Richard, when I die, you're not going to starve. So I felt I had a moral obligation to keep that in mind and to do exactly what I wanted to do, rather than building on the success of like the Threepenny Opera that I did for Pap when I was young, and go on to do more commercial productions.
And you, Will?
I grew up middle class, but like all my brothers and sisters, my parents put them through school. But me, because I was an actor, they were like, oh, talk to us when you're really going to do something. So I went to school for a little while, but I supported myself, and all my life I've supported myself by performing, with a very brief period before when I first came to New York, doing other things like figure modeling.
Well, listen, I really admire the fact that you keep coming back to do things like Idiot Savant, because I've seen you in any number of the, shall we say, non-mainstream exciting theater in the city.
Great.
So it's a great performance by Willem Dafoe in Idiot Savant, created by Richard Foreman at the Public Theater until, when is it running till now, Susan?
It's running till December 20th, and I hope this is not your last play.
You keep saying it's your last play. Do you really mean that?
I do, in a sense. All my ideas now, for some reason, seem to feed into this very unusual kind of film work that I'm doing. Is a new career for me.
Okay, so that's all right then. We still can see your stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for being our guest tonight.
Thank you.
My lord, you must tell us where the body is and go with us to the king.
The body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. The king is a thing.
A thing, my lord.
Of nothing.
There's a highly publicized new production of Hamlet on Broadway, starring the lovely Jude Law. And we thought this would be a good time to talk about Hamlet, one of our favorite plays, with one of our favorite Hamlet experts.
And we are joined tonight by Jim Shapiro, who is a professor at Columbia University, where he teaches a class on Shakespeare. He is also the author of a superb book called 1599, A Year in the Life of Shakespeare. That happens to be the year that Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. And full disclosure, Jim was my professor at Columbia, I hate to say it, about 23 years ago now.
It's getting on.
It's straight A's, though, all the way. Okay, Jim, I went with you to see this Jude Law Hamlet. You've seen a lot of Hamlets over the years. How does Jude Law acquit himself in this role?
I thought he acquitted himself well.
What is he doing? What would you say his interpretation is?
Each